Hey, what's going on, everyone? Just a few quick words before we get today's video started. Normally, I have something written out for you guys before I get, into the video, but today I'm just gonna go off the top of my head just to share a few things. First thing I want to say is this channel has always been about telling people stories. Before the cautionary tales and, before everything, takes a turn. That's always been a common theme on this channel from my first video to my last. So that's how it's always gonna be. In the past, when it comes to my videos of September 2001, I've had people who kind of want to get straight to the events of that day. And I understand that, there are plenty of videos out there that do exactly that. But I just want to let that be clear from the beginning. If that's not what you're here to see, I completely understand. But that's how it's always been here. So I'll, always tell the stories first. So, what happened back in September 2001 affected so many people, not just in New York City, but, all over the world for different reasons. People who used to travel to the States to go to work, people who have family here, countless reasons, countless people who are affected. It just goes to show how everybody is connected one way or another when it comes to this day. People who lost friends, co-workers, family members, parents. And let me tell you, it's something that, I can't imagine how they feel because it affected me in a lot of ways, but nothing compared to what these families go through. So, of course, I always want to tell these stories as respectfully as possible. And, that's always what I aim to do, so all I can hope is that, this video lands with these families the right way and that they understand that this comes from a good place. And, I just always want to make sure that these stories are heard. A lot of you have expressed wanting to donate. I just want to say, it's not necessary. You'll never see a PayPal link here. You'll never see a Cash App link here. I don't have a Patreon at the moment. I like to plan things out. So if anyone's looking to donate to me, it won't be necessary. I would suggest donating to the fundraiser attached to this video, or you can go to the description of this video and there'll be a Pastebin link where there'll be numerous charities listed. So if you want to do that. It goes without saying that what we're going to be discussing today is very, very heavy. And, I always leave a warning at the beginning of the video. I say the warnings, but still, there are many people who still feel strongly, and I completely understand. The details that I'm sharing are there not because I'm trying to make a morbid video or because I'm trying to, shock factor, anything like that. It's because I need people to understand the truth of how that day really turned out. These are accounts coming from people who experienced it, who were there. And I think it's very important for people to understand the true scale of what took place because, it's been 20 plus years now. And over time, the less people talk about things, it's kind of like they start to get a different idea, sometimes of what actually happened or how bad it was. With that being said, today's video is going to contain some very, very hard details to make it through. And I just want people to really keep that in mind before they go forward. Viewer discretion is strongly advised.
No sooner has one New York skyscraper risen above its neighbors than another is on its way to reach a little higher. In 1966, this area was raised to make way for the towers.
57 step 1.
From the World Trade Center observation deck, the highest in the city, the highest outdoor deck in the world, you'll fall in love. And see New York from our point of view.
I'll have to struggle to make this work, but...
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, right.
And the dangerous stuff hasn't happened yet, I'm telling you.
Oh, really?
Rugrats rumors that were finally confirmed today. Twin Towers have been renamed.
It brings together 130,000 people each day. People of business and government involved in processing international.
The site of the World Trade Center is a scene of unspeakable destruction and carnage. After yesterday morning, 2 airplanes crashed into the Twin Towers. eventually bringing those awesome symbols of New York crumbling to the ground. And yet, although the World Trade Center is no longer standing, and although the death toll will eventually rise certainly into the thousands, New York is definitely standing.
They were our neighbors, our friends, our husbands, wives, brothers, sisters, children, and parents. 2,983 innocent men, women, and children. We have asked their families to come here, to speak the names out loud, to remind each of us of a person we lost in New York, in Washington, and Pennsylvania.
Bernard C. Brown II.
David Reed Gamboa Brandhorst.
Asia S. Cottom.
Rodney Dickens.
Dana Falkenberg.
Zoe Falkenberg.
Juliana Valentine McCourt.
Christine Lee Hanson.
Christine Hanson would have turned 20 years old this month. She was the youngest of the nearly 3,000 people killed in the attacks.
Juliana McCourt being one of the youngest victims.
We're heading to a National Geographic conference in California when their plane, Flight 77.
A beautiful, warm Tuesday morning in New York City. That's how most of us would like to remember it. But just hours into that day, the vibrant blue sky would be pierced with thick black smoke, broken glass, and raging fires. An unspeakable act of violence that would claim the lives of thousands. Today, we focus on that day's youngest victim and the other children who lost their lives. All innocent souls who had their trips rerouted by monsters with truly evil intentions. Forever known as the faces of innocence who had their entire lives ahead of them. The youngest victims of September 11th. The family resided in Groton, Massachusetts, about an hour or so drive from Boston. Sue was born in Los Angeles, California, but lived in Korea with her grandmother until she was 6 years old. That's when they would make their way back to the States, with LA becoming their home. She quickly adjusted to life there. She was described as very intelligent, kind, and focused, always respectful and full of love, always with a big smile on her face. During her teen years, she would attend South Pasadena High School, graduating from there in 1984. She would then go on to attend the University of California, Berkeley, receiving a bachelor's degree in biology and psychology in 1989. After receiving her degree, she would land a job at the Cetus Corporation in Berkeley, one of the first biotech companies with a focus on gene amplification. Her love for her work eventually led her to making the move to Boston, where she would attend Boston University's School of Medicine. More focused than ever, she would graduate and earn her master's in medical sciences, landing a job at a lab at the Pulmonary Center at Boston University's School of Medicine. At the same time, she was on a full scholarship, entering the PhD program for pathology and laboratory medicine. After her studies brought her to Boston, she would meet a man named Peter Hanson. Now, she didn't know it at first, but this would be the love of her life. The two of them just clicked. Peter was born in Bridgeport, Connecticut, later residing in the town of Easton with his family. Prior to life in Easton, his family lived in Germany and Singapore, since his father Lee served in the army. Peter would have been around 2 at the time. He was described as a good-hearted child who made friends easily, someone who loved his family and loved music just as much. He attended Samuel Staples Elementary School, followed by Helen Keller Middle School, and then Joe Barlow for his high school years. Peter was also described as a happy and loving person, someone who often had his friends over at his family's home as a kid. some of them being members of a band. As he grew older, his love for music grew just as much. Described as a devoted fan of California's Grateful Dead, he believed the band's music would always stand the test of time. It was said that if you weren't a fan of the band, Peter would make sure you knew exactly what you were missing out on. When he and Sue met, the young couple fell in love and would eventually marry around 1993 or 1994. At first, she was worried her family wouldn't approve of her plans to marry Peter, who wasn't Korean, but they embraced him, welcoming him into the family with open arms. A short time later, Peter would end up going back to business school to build a career, and eventually became the vice president at a company named Time Trade, where he was a successful software salesman. Just a few years later, Sue and Peter would welcome their first and only child into the world. They would name her Christine Lee Hanson. Both families couldn't be happier once Christine arrived. She was described as a beautiful, bubbly, energetic child, known for her rosy cheeks and huge smile. She loved Mickey Mouse and her beloved Peter Rabbit doll that she went everywhere with. By 2001, she was just 2 years old, always curious and as rambunctious as ever. It was said that if she ever got into trouble, her adorable innocence made you forget all about it. She just knew how to make everyone laugh with her cuteness and how she behaved. Even if she was just a toddler, it was clear that she was already displaying a kind heart. Her grandmother Eunice recalled how one time she had gotten foot surgery and Christine saw the condition that she was in. She went and got a band-aid for her grandmother, doing her best to help. A truly heartwarming gesture. She was extremely close to her grandparents, often spending the night with them if her parents were ever away on business. Christine could be found running around her family's home or in the family's garden with her father, helping him plant everything from lilacs to roses. Over the years, Peter had become quite the gardener, even planting as much as 30 trees according to his mother. He, Sue, and Christine loved to be surrounded by nature, the garden becoming one of their favorite places to spend time as a family. Christine's grandfather, the late Lee Hanson, recalled seeing them in that garden during their last visit. He was reading Christine a story before it was time to leave, exchanging a few words with the child as the rest of the family waited outside to say goodbye. "You know, Christine, I love you," he said. "I love you too, Papa," she replied. "Aren't we lucky that we have each other to love?" he said. With a big smile on her face, she broke into her happy dance. Christine was loved and adored by the entire family, as were her parents. What Eunice and Lee couldn't have possibly known was that they would never see Peter, Sue, or little Christine ever again. On the morning of Monday, September 10th of 2001, Peter, Sue, and Christine were due to fly out of Boston to LA. They were going to go visit family and take Christine to Disneyland, but Peter had some scheduling conflicts with work, which will prompt him to delay the flight by 1 day. From here forward, I'll be focusing on the events that unfolded on the morning of Tuesday, September 11th of 2001, what many would come to know as one of the darkest days in this nation's history. On that morning, the family left their home and made their way to Boston Logan International Airport to make their flight. They went through security and made the walk to where their flight would be boarding, Gate C-19, Flight 175. They boarded the plane and took their seats. The plane's captain was given the okay to depart at 8:15 a.m., 15 minutes later than scheduled. Less than 10 minutes into Flight 175's journey, a strange transmission was heard by the plane's pilot. "We have some planes. Just stay quiet and you'll be okay. We are returning to the airport." The transmission was coming from Flight 11, another flight that had departed from Boston Logan just a few minutes before Flight 175. Both planes were originally on the same frequency, leading to the message being heard by Flight 175 and air traffic control. A transmission apparently meant for the passengers of Flight 11. They'd already been hijacked, and the monster now flying the craft was headed toward New York City. It left air traffic control and anyone monitoring the flight in total shock, unsure at first if this was really happening, but the terrifying reality would set in very quickly. This was not a test. It was very, very real. A few minutes later, at 8:42 a.m., pilot Victor J. Saraceni would transmit a message to air traffic control. On the other end was Dave Batiglia. The first thing he said to Dave was, "We heard the threatening transmissions from American 11. While he was relaying that news, he had no idea that the plane he was flying had hijackers on it too. That transmission would be the last to come from Flight 175. By 8:46 a.m., hijackers had complete control of the plane. That would have been the exact same time that Flight 11 crashed directly into the North Tower. The monsters aboard Flight 175 were able to quickly breach the cockpit, turning off the plane's transponder and taking lives in the process. A violent and absolutely terrifying scene. By this point, those aboard were fully aware of what was going on, bearing witness to all of it. It was at 8:52 a.m. that Eunice and Lee Hanson received what would be one of two phone calls at their home, both coming from Peter, and he was calling from the plane. He said the following, as noted in official FBI reports. "Dad, the plane is being hijacked," he said. "Are you joking?" his father Lee responded. But he knew it was no joke. He could tell from the low tone his son spoke in. He was calm, but very serious. "No, Dad, really. The plane is being hijacked. I think they've taken over the cockpit. An attendant has been stabbed, and someone else up front may have been killed. The plane is making strange moves. Call United Airlines. Tell them it's Flight 175, Boston to LA." Lee asked how Sue and Christine were doing during all of this. He said they were all okay. He just needed him to really make that call to United. His father hung up and called Easton Police and told them everything his son said, asking for any help they might be able to provide. At 9 a.m., Peter placed a second call to his parents. "It's getting bad. The stewardess was stabbed. They seem to have knives and mace. They said they have a bomb. It's getting very bad on the plane. Passengers are throwing up and getting sick. The plane is making jerky movements. I don't think the pilot is flying the plane. I think we're going down. I think they intend to go to Chicago or someplace and fly into a building." His father tried his best to offer words of positivity, letting Peter know that these monsters will probably land the plane and ask for a ransom. "I don't think so, Dad. But don't worry. If it happens, it'll be very fast."
The phone rang. I answered it. Peter said, "Dad, the plane is being hijacked." And at first I thought to myself, he must be joking. Maybe he's just trying to fool me. But he said, "No, Dad," he said, "it's really the plane's being hijacked." He said, "I think somebody's been stabbed, and I think the hijackers have taken over the cockpit because the plane is acting funny." He said, would you call United Airlines and let them know?" And I said, "Well, are you okay?" He said, "Yeah, I'm okay." I said, "How's Christine? How's Sue?" He said, "They're okay, Dad." He said, "But make the phone call." I said, "Okay," so I hung up. One of the things he did say to me was that the plane was flying very erratically and that people were very ill. They were throwing up and so forth. He said, "I think that they're planning on crashing this plane into a building, maybe in Chicago or someplace like that." And I said, "No, they don't do that, Peter. You know, they land and they demand ransom and so forth." He said, "I don't think so, Dad." He said, "But don't worry about it." He said, "Because don't worry about it because if it happens, it'll be quick."
His parents then turned on the television to see if anything about the hijackings was on the news. They would see coverage of the North Tower up in flames, their first time learning about the horrors unfolding in New York's financial district. Peter's phone call with his dad was said to last about 3 minutes. At 9:03 a.m., they were still on the phone. That's when Peter said his last words to his father. "Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God." As he said those words, Flight 175 was headed directly at the South Tower, with his passengers likely able to see exactly what was about to happen. Just seconds later, the call went dead. Peter's father wanted to call back, but he feared he would put his son in more danger by making his cell phone ring. When he turned to look at the TV, he would see as the plane his son, daughter-in-law, and granddaughter were on crashed directly into the South Tower. The devastation was unbelievable and being broadcast to millions across the globe in real time. Peter's parents couldn't think, they couldn't speak, they couldn't even cry. It was hard to fathom that this was really happening, but it was the horrible truth. The last time Eunice had spoken to Christine was just 2 nights before this, wishing the family a safe trip to California. And now, all the passengers on Flight 175, including Christine, were gone. Passengers spent the majority of their flight terrified, sick from the plane's erratic movements and from knowing the danger they were in, face to face with an evil they had never known before this day. That beautiful, warm Tuesday morning would end with nearly 3,000 lives coming to an abrupt and absolutely horrifying end. Rescue efforts were already underway since the North Tower was hit. Now the problem had doubled in size, and so had the casualties. It was described by survivors, firefighters, police, and EMS as the definition of hell on earth. Some with cameras stated that they chose to not take videos or pictures of certain things they saw, due to how horrible it truly was. The following information was gathered from the book Fall and Rise, The Story of 9/11 by Mitchell Zuckoff. It speaks of rescuers arriving at the towers to find nothing but carnage, the grounds littered with human remains everywhere they looked. Some burned beyond recognition, while others were still wearing jewelry and clothing. Rescuers arriving at the towers saw something they would never forget. A foot still inside of a pink sneaker, and it looked like it belonged to a small girl. Some thought of their own children who could have been about the same age. Upon seeing the foot, one EMT tried looking away up into the sky, just so he could try to shake it off and distract himself. But when he looked up, he would see bodies raining from high above in the North Tower, an absolutely shocking sight unlike any of them had ever seen. A level of chaos, tragedy, and human suffering that no manual or training could ever prepare them for. Less than 2 hours after the attack started, both the North and South Towers were reduced to rubble, with many still trapped inside. It would leave downtown Manhattan looking like a war zone as people ran for their lives and fought for breath, doing whatever they could to make it to safety. A level of destruction that many would find hard to believe if it wasn't on video and in photos. But the horror didn't only strike here, and while Christine would be the youngest to lose her life out of the thousands, she would not be the only child to suffer this awful fate. On the same flight as Christine was David Reed Gamboa Brandhorst of Los Angeles, California. Born on June 23rd of 1998, he was only 3 years old. He was known as a gentle, loving child who loved playing with Legos and eating his vegetables. In fact, he preferred them over sweets like cake and candy. He was adopted by couple Daniel Brandhorst and Ronald Gamboa. The couple met at a party in the late 80s and hit it off, moving to Los Angeles a few years later. After 10 years together, they wanted to start a family, adopting David right after he was born. They showered him with love and were said to be doting fathers. They even had plans of adopting more children when David got older. They were visiting family in Cape Cod and were on their way back to Los Angeles aboard Flight 175 when it was overtaken by hijackers. They never made it back home. Also on Flight 175, and also on her way to Disneyland, was Juliana Valentine McCourt of New London, Connecticut. She was born on May 4th of 1997, just 4 years old. She was described as a sensitive and loving child, taught to be kind and respectful, especially to other children. Nicknamed Miss J by her family, she was only 4 but came with a big personality. It was said that she reflected her mother's love for gardening, animals, and just life in general. On that morning, little Juliana was accompanied by her mother, Ruth Magdalene McCourt, and her mother's best friend, Paige Marie Farley Hackle. Paige was also Juliana's godmother. The three were headed to Los Angeles from Boston to take Juliana to Disneyland, but when Paige discovered that she couldn't use flyer miles for the trip, she instead opted to book another flight, Flight 11, also out of Boston. They saw each other at the airport one last time and said goodbye to one another. They planned on meeting when they touched down in Los Angeles. The last thing they ever expected was that they would suffer the same horrific fate, with both of their flights being hijacked and everyone's lives coming to an end in the financial district. Juliana would be the oldest of 3 kids on that flight to lose her life. While the plane that they were on was about to crash into the South Tower, Juliana's uncle, Ron Clifford, who had been in town for an important meeting, was down below, helping save a woman's life. He hadn't realized his sister and niece were on that plane until he was already on his way home. Flight 77 was en route to California out of Washington Dulles International Airport. Among the youngest on the flight were sisters 8-year-old Zoe Falkenberg and 3-year-old Dana Falkenberg, 11-year-old Rodney Dickens, 11-year-old Bernard Curtis Brown II, and 11-year-old Asia S. Cottom. Born on November 8th of 1992, Zoe was described as intelligent, ambitious, and caring, a child full of life. She and her family lived in University Park, Maryland, where she attended University Park Elementary School. While there, she was said to be a top student. She was active on the school's swim team and ballet. She was always known to be a loving big sister to little Dana, who of course looked up to her. Dana, born July 21st of 1998, had just celebrated her 3rd birthday 2 months prior to boarding Flight 77. She was described as funny, charming, and always happy, as a child should be, known for her big smile and curly red hair. She attended the Greenwood Nursery School. She was the youngest on her flight at the tender age of just 3 years old. The girls were adored by their parents. Their daughters were their everything. This trip to California was supposed to be the first stop before the family made their way to Australia. Their mother, Leslie Whittington, planned on taking a few months to work at the Australian National University, located in Canberra. It was a huge opportunity and she was very much looking forward to it, but they would never make it there. Asia S. Cottom was born on January 13th of 1990 and resided in the North Michigan Park neighborhood of Washington, D.C. with her parents and brother. She was described by her parents as a very active child, never standing still and never slowing down. Known for her infectious smile and huge personality, she attended Bertie Backus Middle School in Washington, D.C. In 2001, she was on her way to grade 6. She was known to help other students who might have been having a hard time in class. If she didn't understand something right away, she would keep at it until she had a good understanding of what she was studying. Since a very young age, she had dreams of going to college, and there was no doubt that she would have been on her way. She was very much adored by her parents, who always supported her. She had won an essay contest sponsored by the National Geographic Society for kids out of the Washington, D.C. area. On that morning, Asia, accompanied by her teacher Sarah Clark and fellow students, would board Flight 77 that morning and were now on their way to California to attend an ecology conference related to the contest that she had won. Asia and her teacher would never make it. Bernard Curtis Brown II was born on June 19th of 1990 and resided at the Bolling Air Force Base in Washington, D.C. with his parents. Bernard was described as highly intelligent, witty, and full of energy. According to his mother, he loved going to school. Even if he wasn't feeling well, he would tell his parents that he was okay just so he could make it to class. It was said that even if he stood up late at night, he would wake up just a few short hours later, full of energy. He'd often stay up late watching basketball, his favorite sport. His mom didn't mind, because no matter what, he was always up and ready for school the next day. He was also said to be a very neat child, always making sure his bed was made, his room was clean, and his clothes were smoothly ironed. On that Tuesday morning, Bernard got ready, threw on a brand new pair of Jordans he had just gotten, and waited to be picked up by Hilda Taylor, a 6th grade teacher who taught at Leckie Elementary School in Washington, where Bernard attended. They were on their way to the same National Geographic conference as Asia. As excited as Bernard was to be going to California for 4 days, he and Hilda would never make it to their destination. Rodney Dickens was born on February 20th of 1990 and resided in Washington, D.C. He lived there with his parents and siblings. It was said that Rodney grew up in a rough part of D.C., but while he was surrounded by different influences in his neighborhood, he stood away from anything negative, always remaining focused on his studies. He attended Ketchum Elementary School where he was in the 6th grade and a top student. He always made the honor roll, just like his younger and older sisters. Rodney was described as kind-hearted and loving, a kid who enjoyed playing video games, spending quality time with his siblings, and last but not least, watching pro wrestling. He would watch whenever it was on TV. No matter what else was on or what he was doing, he always made it home to tune in. He would often watch pay-per-view events over at his uncle's house whenever they aired. His parents and rest of his family loved him dearly, always proud of his hard work and who he was becoming. On that morning, Rodney was accompanied by teacher James Debonair. They were also on their way to that National Geographic conference, just like Asia, Bernard, and their teachers. It was said to be a dream trip for Rodney, something he was looking forward to. This was his first time ever getting on a plane, and unfortunately, it would also be his last. On September 11th of 2001, American Airlines Flight 77 left the runway and would take off at 8:20 a.m. It's believed that sometime between 8:51 and 8:54 a.m., as they flew over eastern Kentucky, hijackers aboard the plane launched their attack on passengers and took over the cockpit. At 9:12 a.m., flight attendant Renee May placed 2 phone calls to her parents, letting them know the plane she was on was being taken over. She made a similar plea to the one that Peter made to his parents, asking her parents to call American Airlines and let them know what was happening. Just 25 minutes later, at 9:37 a.m., Flight 77 was flown directly into the Pentagon, claiming the lives of every last person on board and 125 people inside the building. The picture you see on your screen was taken just moments before Asia, Bernard, and Rodney would board the flight with their teachers. Every last innocent soul on those planes mattered. Every child on those planes that I just talked about had their entire lives ahead of them. Their last moments would be filled with fear, uncertainty, and no chance to say goodbye to their loved ones. Faces of innocence, forever tied to one of the darkest days in history. A fourth plane, United Flight 93, would crash near Shanksville, Pennsylvania at 10:03 a.m. after what was said to be a struggle between passengers and the monsters who took over the plane. Audio recordings from the cockpit would capture some of their final moments. Nobody survived. The horrors that unfolded that morning in September of 2001 would be felt by millions to this very day. An event that no matter how much you see or hear about it, it's hard to grasp that something so horrible unfolded in just a few hours, especially on such a huge scale. So much tragedy and so much suffering, and to see it play out right before your eyes on live TV, or worse, if you were there. It's truly one of the hardest things to fathom, but it did happen. You see popular movies where New York or a city similar to it is the backdrop, scenes that depict destruction everywhere you look. But on that morning, that was reality. There was no digital green screen for reshoots, and no director yelling cut. This was real. Their worlds were transformed into scenes of chaos and loss, with men, women, and children experiencing terrifying final moments. Every last soul who lost their lives that day, and their loved ones, matter. Every person who spent endless hours at ground zero, putting their own health at risk in the process, matters. Families left with a level of pain that can't easily be put into words. Loved ones still mourn those lost, while still struggling with a grief they never anticipated. Family and friends who till this day share memories and mementos with the memorial site, just to ensure these innocent souls are never forgotten. They came face to face with an evil that a lot of us have never experienced. Thanks to the many charities created and places like the Memorial Museum where the towers once stood, what took place on that morning will never be forgotten. It'll forever be a part of history. But while it's important to learn and understand exactly what happened and how so many lives came to an abrupt end, it'll always be just as important to remember how they lived. Never stop telling their stories. Rest in peace to all the lives lost on September 11th of 2001. My deepest condolences go out to all the families and friends affected. You aren't forgotten.